What's up, everybody? Thanks for listening to the Whatcast. Yes, we're still around. Yes, I've been dragging ass. It's all me this time. It's only me.
It's all me. Why has it been a bit?
Yeah.
I don't even know, man. The days and weeks bleed together.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of zoning out.
Well, I guess that I will also apologize, but again, I'll point my finger back at Mateo because I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I didn't even know, guys.
That's how zoned out I've been. But I am zoned back in with a really fun episode. Mike had brought a documentary that had recently come out to my attention called The Manhattan Abduction. I was very shocked to have not come across this case ever at all. And this was a blast to watch, dude. We were talking before about how much we enjoyed this documentary, but this case was a blast to watch and learn about. I'm very glad that you wanted to cover this and that you had watched this. I don't watch pretty much any TV at all. So I don't watch hardly any streaming services. I watch that shit even less. So I'm glad that you caught this and that we get to talk about this. But this case is, as the title implies, it's about an alien abduction that takes place in Manhattan, New York, which sparked my interest immediately, probably for the same reason that it sparks yours. And that is, how the hell does someone get abducted in the middle of Manhattan? And it's an absolutely bizarre story, and it gets weirder than just somebody getting abducted in New York.
Yeah. I mean, that's plenty weird on its own, though.
It is.
But this was a case. I mean, it's not too often that we can find like classic cases that we haven't covered. And like you said, you hadn't heard of this one. And actually, I don't recall ever hearing about this one either. And I guess I just kind of chalk it up to it being like contemporary with me growing up. And when I first got into aliens, like all the books and stuff that I would read as a kid, I got from the library. And the library only had shit from like the 70s and maybe early 80s about aliens and shit. So I knew about the classic cases like, Betty and Barney Hill and all that stuff, but this one I had never heard of. And then somehow, even like as I got older, I guess it's probably because I never read any Bud Hopkins work. And he wrote a book about this, way back in the early 90s. But I never read it. And I'm familiar with Bud Hopkins' work, but I'm not familiar with all the witnesses that he worked with. So chances are I probably came across like this case and like a summary of this case in one of those compilation books way back when, and it just kind of, it's a typical alien abduction story. So I just filed it under alien abduction and kept going, not realizing that all this crazy shit happened.
Right. I'm very interested in to go back and look in all my books to see if this case pops up at all. There's two things that I find very interesting about this case. Is one, you kind of mentioned before, we're both pretty familiar with Bud's work. If you've listened to Art Bell at all, you've heard Bud talk. He's done a lot of work. He's written a lot of books. So it's not like we've read everything he's ever done, but we're very familiar with his work and what he does with abductees and hypnotherapy and all that stuff. And the other thing that's very interesting about this documentary is about that one that we haven't heard of this before. It just happened to, maybe I've seen it in a summary like you're saying, but this was documented basically as it all happened. So we get a very up close and personal look at this entire case from start to finish. Now, what do you know of Bud Hopkins, Mike? He's a ufologist who did a lot with abductees through hypnosis, correct?
Yeah, he uncovered a lot of cases, and was kind of like the go-to guy for the hypnotic regression cases. I guess and we'll get into it more later on, but his methods were called into question later in life, and whether it was out of like some petty grudge or just to be vindictive, or whether it is an accurate accounting of his methods, it kind of put a a bit of a negative spin on who had always been, seemingly a credible researcher. He was a believer, but he wasn't willing to just buy anything. Yeah, he's the guy for these old hypnotic regression cases.
Right, that was kind of his thing. So I'll also mention that this documentary is shot in the form of two perspectives. One is through the eyes of a woman named Linda, who is the abductee in this case, and the other is through the eyes of a woman named Carol, who I'll just say right now, I'll have my thoughts about both women later, but she's the skeptic, now ex-wife of Bud Hopkins, who set out to prove Linda is full of shit.
Well, she didn't start out that way, though. She started out as, I guess, like an agnostic skeptic. Like, she was kind of there to document everything. And she, over time, based on what she was seeing, started to kind of believe what was going on. And for a while, she believed what Linda was saying. But then things kind of turned, and she thought that Linda was in it for the fame and trying to get attention and everything. Looking at the documentary, I could see where she's coming from in thinking that Linda is looking for fame. Now, so like I can see it from that side, but also as it goes on, it almost seems like she's starting to become jealous of Linda's relationship with Bud. And because they were married at the time, I could see how that would be. Like, Linda would call him at all hours, and Bud would get worried about it. And in her mind, and this is what Carol Rainey, that's his ex-wife's name, she's the one who defamed him later in life, and she said she was doing it out of integrity, and she wanted to make sure that people weren't being duped or whatever. But she is claiming that he became emotionally invested in Linda's story, and as a result of his emotional investment, he stopped being objective and started taking everything she was saying at face value. And the story starts crazy. So the initial event, well, I shouldn't say the inciting incident, maybe, the one that talked about abduction. This happened on November 30th in 1989. And Linda Napolitano was, at this point in her life, she was a stay-at-home mom that lived in New York City. And she lived on the 12th floor of an apartment building. And on that evening, there were allegedly 3 beings that entered her apartment and abducted her. They were able to levitate her body and float her through the window and onto this giant craft that was hovering over the city. And then from there, it's your typical abduction story. They did experiments on her, checked her reproductive organs, took blood samples, all that stuff. And then they returned her back to her bedroom. She had no recollection of this initially. A few months prior to this event, she had sent Bud Hopkins it was their first correspondence. She had sent him a letter that was basically reporting a previous encounter that she had 13 years ago when she was camping in the Catskill Mountains. And she hadn't ever talked about this, but she began to attend these abduction support groups that Bud Hopkins would run. And through there, she kind of started to develop this researchy type relationship. So this, all the big one, the New York one that happened at the end of November 1989. And but going back to the initial one, back in 13 years before, she felt this lump in her nose and apparently had X-rays done that showed that there was something there. And they show pictures of the X-ray in the documentary, and it looks like you know what it looked like to me? Like it looked like a spring, like a clipped spring coil.
Yeah, it looked very much like that. When she contacts Bud, she says that she noticed this bump on her nose and she went to the doctors and they told her, yeah, you've had surgery on that side of your nose. It's all scar tissue. And she was very adamant that she had never had surgery. And that's when they did the x-ray and they find what appears to be some type of implant, which we're both familiar with alien implants. And I found this interesting is that when she first contacted Bud with this and he responded, one of the first things he did was contact her surgeon. And you can see, I mean, this is all unfolding in real time. He asks them, would you be willing to sign an affidavit that you performed this, you're her doctor, you performed the x-ray and you performed the surgery? And they said, absolutely. So that's the evidence that's already being presented as far as what's happening to Linda.
Right. And I love how the documentary actually has like all these recorded phone calls and interviews and stuff. It's really cool how they're able to cut that stuff in. It really helps.
Yeah, it really does. Carol is at this point, she's his wife, and she's a documentary filmmaker. So
she was really just trying to document the whole process and see if they were able to uncover like any sort of evidence or commonalities in the cases that would suggest that this was a real phenomena.
Right.
But the weird thing about this implant though was when she went to have it removed by a specialist, it had disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Like they tend to.
Like and we've heard about that a lot, but we've also heard of the opposite where I mean they made a whole documentary about the doctor that removed alien implants. So maybe some of them they don't care about. I don't know how they determine what they're going to take and what they're not going to take. I don't know. But so this story with her getting taken out of her building and everything, like it sounds fucking crazy. Like you're in New York City, there's going to be people that saw you floating out of the window or floating into the sky or even saw a UFO hovering above a building.
Right. It was at this point for me that I was like, okay, this is probably why I haven't heard of this case, because after hearing how she was levitated out of her bedroom window and up into the sky to a waiting gigantic UFO, I was like, I probably just skimmed right over this.
Yeah. But then other reports started coming in, and there were, I think they said total 23 people who had called in to report what they witnessed. The one that got me, and I don't know how this wasn't more widely reported and corroborated, but there was a guy who was on the Brooklyn Bridge who said that he observed it, and he said he saw that a craft flew over his vehicle and his vehicle died, and then there was a blackout, and then during this blackout is when she was abducted. But why would his car be the only one that died? And why wasn't there like widespread reporting of a blackout and a UFO?
Right. When I heard that part, I mean, his story was very interesting. He said he was going across the Brooklyn Bridge there, delivering newspapers at that hour. And like you said, he saw the giant craft and his car died. And I found that interesting. That's more EMP than just some outage. I looked up blackouts in Manhattan during that year. It's not reported, so I don't know if the blackout lasted only a few moments, but there's no real big record of a blackout happening in New York at this time. But this fella says that's what he witnessed and saw this craft. And didn't he say he saw her fly out her window and up into the craft?
Yeah. Yep. Because he said he thought it was a movie. He thought maybe they were filming a movie.
And that was said by a few of the other witnesses. There was a few people who they actually get on film, and they say they film movies here all the time. And when I looked up and saw a lady, and accurately describing what she wears to bed, mind you, a lady in a white nightgown come out of her window and go up into the sky and disappear. And that was said by a few people. It was bizarre. But I just found that fascinating. As I mean, like we all know, they film a lot of movies in New York, and the people who live there are probably pretty used to that. And for them to see that and equate it to it looking something like out of a movie is just bizarre.
Well, really, I mean, when faced with something like that, what else are you going to think?
Yeah, I was so surprised that many people came forward, which we will get into a little bit later. But yeah, so after this, this is her initial report to Bud. And she goes through hypnotherapy a few times, does a few sessions with Bud, and it's all videotaped by Carol. But sometime after this, Linda calls Bud in a complete frantic state and said that she was visited by two men claiming to be police officers. And they introduced themselves as Dan.
It was Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith.
I was waiting for that in the documentary, but it didn't go that crazy. They introduced
Yeah, no, if only.
They introduced themselves as Dan and Richard, and they said that they were police officers who happened to be parked outside of Linda's apartment building that night and saw Linda fly out of her window and up into the sky and disappear. And they wanted to know how she did that. Now, one of them, Dan, became very pushy and even threatening to Linda, to the point that she demanded that they leave. And she said to Bud that she watched Richard grab Dan by the collar and slam him into the wall of her hallway while pretty much bashing him for being rough and that forward with Linda. Apparently he got pretty rough with her as far as what he was saying, his verbiage towards her and stuff like that.
Yeah, he got his panties all bunched up.
Right. What did you think when you heard this? I mean, this is pretty weird. I mean, we're watching Bud get the call. It's all recorded. This is happening in real time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really weird story, and it gets weirder from there even. But it had a very Men in Black sort of vibe to it. And then when she added the fact that one of them grabbed the other by the collar and started slamming him against a wall, like, what the fuck is going on there, man?
Right, that's not protocol for police officers right off the bat.
No.
We can tell they're not police officers.
Yeah.
And that ended up being true. I guess 3 weeks after this visit, Bud himself received an audio cassette tape from Richard. He was apologetic and confessed that they were not police officers, that they were in fact federal agents acting as security for the Secretary General of the UN. What did you think about that, Mike?
That was a fun little twist. I did enjoy that. And apparently based on what they were saying, the Secretary General also witnessed this event. He was in the car with them, and the three of them witnessed it together.
Yeah, a kind of very weird twist to a weird twist. But Bud, being an investigator, and his partner in all this, I forget the gentleman's name, forgive me. If you guys watch it, you'll see him there. But he said that Bud was a hell of an investigator. And Bud, being a good investigator, got right to the idea of looking at recent news footage of this UN dude coming and going from the UN building. And as crazy as that sounds, sure enough, Linda spotted both of them, pointed them out in many videos of people escorting this UN bigwig guy back and forth.
So that I don't necessarily take as being confirmation of anything, because if she was making, and we'll get into, you know, our opinions on the case, but if she was making this up, it would be very easy to just, like, if you saw that guy, you're like, oh, look, his bodyguards, because obviously he's going to have a security detail. So you just point out two assholes that are in more than one picture, and that's them.
Right. Not difficult to do. So they of course, during this time, I don't know, Mike, it seemed to me that they try to make it look like this whole time she was making TV appearances on fucking Geraldo Rivera, Donahue, and all the other talk shows of the time. Well, at least Bud was, right?
Yeah, so Bud was doing he was making the rounds with various people that he was working with, and they do show one, and I can't remember the dude's name, but this guy who was an abductee himself, and the crowd's like laughing at him, and he's getting all pissed off about it, and like I felt bad for him because it's gotta suck like to have this horrific experience happen, and then you have the everyone that you're telling your experience to just laughing at you like you're a fucking joke. And like he was very earnest, you know, like I didn't, there wasn't anything about him that gave me the vibe that he would be like making shit up just for kicks and then getting all indignant about it.
Right, I agree with that. The guy who you're talking about, and he
Yeah.
did get upset, and it was a very stark reminder of why people don't come forward with this information and tell their stories.
Yeah.
It seemed that every show or every appearance that they made, no matter what they were saying, I mean, just people were laughing and jeering while the host was explaining what Bud Hopkins did. It was just it was. I felt bad for them too, and I was just like, wow, yeah, that's why people don't come out with their stories. I wouldn't after seeing how they were treated.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't even, you know, I have the platform to do it where people would listen and be like, oh shit, he was abducted, and I still wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't tell any of you guys.
Right. I would have to agree after watching how these people were treated. And I don't think this was back in the 80s and 90s. I don't think people would treat people who were telling this story.
Yeah, I think they'd be looked at a bit differently now. But even still, like I think a lot of people, like we just in the past, 8 years, we've only just started seeing UFOs being covered seriously on the news without having the X-Files theme play.
Right.
And some like smarmy asshole just be like, aliens in Egypt. Like, fuck you, asshole. Maybe there are.
Yeah, they just had another one of those hearings, didn't they? I heard there was a bunch of nothing. Just
aliens in the ocean.
Is that what they talked about?
They talked about a craft that came out of the ocean, yeah.
Yeah, they've said that 100 times.
Yeah. So, aliens are real, man.
Yeah. They're just all over, and that's just how it is now.
Yeah, just accept it. But even still, with all this stuff going on, like people talking about being abducted are still kind of, if not outright laughed at, not exactly believed.
Right.
So, but getting back to it, yeah, at that time Bud Hopkins was doing a lot of different shows, and Linda was like his prized poodle, so to speak. Like she was an attractive mother who had this story, and she was really good on camera and kind of had this character. And even now in the documentary, like she's what in her probably 70s now. I don't exactly know, but 60s, 70s. And even now, like she's got a presence for the camera. And like there was one point where I rolled my eyes, and it was kind of cringeworthy, but where she's talking about when she was a singer and she's lip syncing her old song, and like she's performing it in her living room, and it was,
Right. Yeah. That part was a little cringy. I think that was a bad choice from the director.
That was a bad choice there, but
right.
But it just goes to show, like she has a stage presence.
Yes.
So
when they revealed that she had been, she released a record. She was signed to a label, and like by the time she was 15, I might add, the music that they played that was her singing was fucking fantastic. It was really good. But when they said that, I kind of was like, I see, because she does have a presence about her. Even all the reenactment, she did like too good of a job. So she does have a presence about her, and we'll get into that later about what Carol has to say about that, because she notices that too.
Yeah, but it makes sense that he would want to bring her on these shows. You know, she's very well spoken. She's a mother. She's got this story. There's witnesses, so it makes it a very compelling case. And she doesn't seem like she's batshit, so she started being like the face of Bud's research for a while. But I did think it was weird how she reverted back to covering her. Like there was, I think on Ricky Lake she was on, but she stayed behind a screen, so you couldn't see who she was.
She did go on Ricky Lake and request to stay anonymous at this point in time, because after Dan and Richard said that they worked for the government, after she learned that there might be possible government involvement, she kind of got scared a little bit, which is understandable.
Yeah, Dick and Dan lingering around. Who wants to deal with those assholes?
Yeah, I don't. So after this, once again, Linda calls Bud in a panic. And this time she says that she believed that she had just been abducted right then and there, and that the aliens were back. So he has her come over. They do more hypnosis, and it's revealed that, yes, the aliens did come back, but now it seems that they're abducting her whole family. Her son Jimmy and her husband were all found by Linda standing in a living room in a daze with nosebleeds. So Bud interviews Johnny, and after the interview, he wholeheartedly believes that Johnny had been abducted as well. And at this point in time, Carol is starting to doubt Linda's story. As you watched this documentary, Mike, did this reoccurrence of an abduction raise your eyebrow at all? Or were you just like, holy shit, I can't believe this happened?
Honestly, I started calling it into question when Dick and Dan showed up.
Okay.
That, for me, that seemed... because they did the initial investigation for her abduction, and they had done all that. They had done her whole thing, and once that's done, like, what more is there? You've done everything. Like, unless you've got more shit going on, we're moving on to other cases. But then she had more shit going on, and then she had more shit going on, and then she had more shit going on. So it just kept being more and more and more, and it gets to a point where do you draw the line? Like, all this wacky shit is happening to just this person. Like, you've interviewed so many people, you've done this for so many people, none of this shit has ever happened, and now you're getting all this weird shit happening to this one witness, the face of your research.
Yep.
I don't know.
And
that's where I started calling it, but then listening to because again they recorded most of the calls that Bud had with her, listening to her on the other end of the line, like it sounded very much like a performance.
Yeah, and Carol was getting that same feeling about this. At this point, after this second abduction, this is when Carol started to doubt Linda's story more than believe it. But she also notices Bud's emotional attachment to Linda, and they play some phone calls between the two of them, and he is a little bit dramatic, I think. But Carol said that this...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but Carol said that this set off alarm bells for her. So she decided to go back and look at all the hypnosis sessions that they had done over the years. And she, like I said, had been Bud's wife at this time. She had been filming all their hypnosis sessions, and she compared them to Linda's. And now there's a discrepancy, Mike. We've talked about hypnosis before. What did you think about, and please explain this specific discrepancy that Carol noticed?
The fact that Carol felt that Linda was not in like the deep state that people are in when they're under hypnosis, and she noticed certain features of her face and the way she was talking. It appeared more like somebody who was faking being hypnotized than someone who was actually hypnotized.
Now, did you agree with that statement? I mean, there was a clear difference. I mean, most of the people that were hypnotized.
Yeah, I'm not I'm no expert, so I can't speak with any sort of authority, but yeah, it looked to me like someone with their eyes closed telling a story, not someone recalling memories through hypnosis.
Right. The what she noticed is, for me, what stuck out the most is all these people that are under hypnosis. Which I mean, I agree with her statement that this is how most of the time that people who are under hypnosis act. They're kind of slow and searching for words and having trouble recollect things. And she just goes back and plays for you, while she's pointing this out. All these sessions with Linda, and like you said, Mike, that's a great way to put it. Is that she was just telling a story with her eyes closed. She was very matter of fact, didn't hesitate on anything. It just seemed very odd. And for me, that's when I went, hey, I don't think that lady's hypnotized at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So we get this story that her family 100% believes. So that's where the weird thing comes in. Like, did she convince her entire family to live this lie, or did she? Is she capable of cult level brainwashing? Did she hypnotize them, or is something really happening and she's just hamming it up?
Right. I mean, what do we see? About 23 separate witnesses at this point.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, like we talked about the Ricky Lake appearance, she wanted to stay anonymous because of the potential government involvement. And it, again, her paranoia proves to be worthwhile to notice, because she calls Bud in a panic yet again. This time, she claims she had been kidnapped and held against her will. But
she calls him during the kidnapping.
During the kidnapping? Okay, well, how did I miss this?
They've got the call. She calls him saying that she's being followed, and he's like all like, being dramatic with her like he has been in previous calls. And then you just hear her scream, and you hear a man's voice. I can't remember what he said. Something like, you can't get away from us, or something. I can't remember exactly what he said, but yeah, he abducts her.
Now, who is this person that's abducted her?
It wasn't it Dick and Dan?
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure, because in my notes I had that written down, but then I didn't remember for sure. So yeah, and she just, happens to call Bud while it's happening. So he's recording it, so we have this abduction on tape.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's like there's always more. It's continuing on. It's not. It just gets like, it keeps topping itself. It's not like she just saw another UFO. Like, oh my God, I saw this weird light in the sky. No, she's being abducted by federal agents now, in public.
Yeah,
allegedly.
So, back to the waiting arms of Bud. She goes, and in my notes here, Mike, I have the wrath of Carol. This is when Carol says,
that's well said. The wrath of Carol, indeed.
Yeah, she said this was complete bullshit, and she was not going to buy this anymore. And she was watching Bud become more invested into Linda and her story. At this point in time, there was movie deals that were made. Bud's new book on this case was going to come out. So what does Carol do? She launches a full investigation of her own into this investigation of Linda's story. And this,
she's investigating the investigation now.
Right. This is where I was shocked. This shocked me. For me, Bud's always been seen as legit. Bud fucking Hopkins, man. He's fucking the hypnotherapy guy. Like I said at the beginning, as well as Michael, we're both familiar with his work. Maybe not every little bit of it, but we know who he is. But boy, did Carol ruin that for me. After interviewing the 23 witnesses, we found that most of them, man, should not have been ever considered as witnesses. There was a lot of them that saw nothing. There was a lady who saw a light outside but didn't bother looking at it. There was even one of their witnesses when Linda was doing this investigation that she found that sounded a lot like Linda. So when she presented,
I wouldn't say a lot. I would say exactly like Linda.
Right. When she plays,
almost like Linda called and said, "Hey, I saw a UFO abduct somebody, and there was a power outage also.
Exactly.
And then they couldn't find this person.
Yes.
This was the only witness they couldn't track down, who was like always in the shower or taking a dump or something.
Yeah, when Carol brought this information to Bud, one, he didn't like it very much at all, but he said, she told him, try to track this witness down, this one that sounds like Linda. And they have it on film. Willie calls them and, oh, she's already gone to bed or she's left for work early. So this person they couldn't get a hold of, which I found extremely suspicious. And furthermore, this whole time, they were getting letters, more and more letters and tapes from Richard and Dan. Some of these letters had written parts of them on like who they were addressed to, and Carol had a handwriting expert take a look at these letters. And what ended up happening is that they proved that one of the letters in some of these letters that were sent, they matched Linda's handwriting. And they also proved that one of the signatures that's supposed to be this dude from the UN was a copy from a previous signature. And he talked about how people do not sign their signature the same way twice. And it's just an exact match. And so it proves that these letters were being faked. And she also, made a good point that she caught Bud just straight up ignoring evidence that would go against this case. And that was one of the major things for her, that he was just ignoring the fact that these witnesses basically had fucking nothing to say, that he was just using them as a number. Cool, they came forward. And she decided to write a big old report on this and publish it. And like you said, Mike, maybe why we don't hear about this case, I don't go to I don't believe shit, skeptichomie.com, but I don't think this would be promoted in a lot of the things that we read about Bud Hopkins. But this effectively destroyed his career. The movie deal was canceled. His book didn't come out, anytime soon after that, and it led to their.
No, the book came out. It wasn't republished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the publisher said they weren't going to republish it. So I'd imagine probably now, if you're looking for that book, it's probably going to be very expensive.
Right, no kidding. So for me, I mean, we like you said, it doesn't have to be true that these dudes that Linda pointed out were these actually dudes. That was the first questionable thing, but there's a part of me that says, those letters were faked, but maybe they weren't faked by Linda. Did you think that at all?
But why was Linda's handwriting on the return envelope?
I think that if there's somebody trying to fuck with them, especially at a federal government level, that they can do that quite easily. Their job is to muddy the waters.
Well, I mean this is probably not going to come as a surprise to any of our longtime listeners, but I do not buy Linda Napolitano's story, and even less now that the documentary has come out. So since the documentary has come out, Carol Rainey has passed away. She's no longer with us, but Linda is saying that Rainey, she was doing all of this because she was an embittered alcoholic ex-wife who just wanted revenge against Bud. And that's the reason. But Linda is suing Netflix because she's stating that the documentary defames her and it paints her in an unflattering light. And she said she agreed to have her story told by Netflix after she was promised that there would only be one interview with Rainey that was used, and that she would be allowed to tell the true story of her abduction, and that's the way it would be presented.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So she is now suing them for putting this out and kind of shining a light on maybe the evidence that she is a fraud. But the one thing that still gets me is her son still Like, he didn't want his face revealed. So they did interview him, but they concealed his face. But he talked about it, and he said it was very real, and what she's saying happened. So again, if either he has just been conditioned to lie about this so much that now he believes the lie. This is part of his life now, but he said he's had to undergo therapy numerous times as a result of this. He basically has PTSD.
Yeah.
Because of what he experienced. And I mean, you're not going to have PTSD for nothing. So something caused that he relates to this story.
Right. When they brought him out, he said when he didn't want to show his face, I said out loud to myself, I says, man, this experience fucked him up a little bit. And one of the first things he says is that this whole experience fucked me up a little bit.
Yeah.
And he talked about how he's in therapy. And I mean, if he's going through therapy, I mean, he's older now. He has been going through therapy. With that being the case, I think somebody would have been able to detect some type of brainwashing. I think somebody would have worked out, going back through the memories and maybe remembering his mother telling him, you got to say this. We'll get a bigger apartment if you say this. You'll get fucking, whatever you want if you say this. I think that would have come up, and he was very honest about how it was something that happened, that it fucking sucked. It wasn't fucking cool. He sounded like a lot of abductees. He sounded like some people that we've talked to about being abducted, and it just wasn't a cool fucking thing at all. And he didn't know what to fucking tell you, but that what his mother said is what's happened. So now at the end, as I watched this documentary, I watched the first episode, and I was like, whoa, dude, why haven't we heard about this? And you're like, just wait. And the second episode came on. I was like, bro, there's 23 fucking witnesses. And you're like, just wait. And then the third episode, I was like, oh, man, this thing's probably all bullshit. What do you think about the things that this case presents that just aren't bullshit? I mean, there's not 23 witnesses that saw Linda fly out of her window, but there is still, I think, 3 or 4 people who said that they saw her. They described that what she was wearing when it happened. Her son sticking to his story like that. Her husband, they talked to him, and he says all this happened. I know that Linda had a way with the camera. The pictures that she showed of who she was singing to when she was 15 years old, I mean, it was like John fucking Wayne. I mean, she knew like Liza Minnelli and like crazy shit. She was rather successful, and she did give that up to be a mom. But I don't think anybody in their right mind thinks they're going to get a fucking record deal by telling a story about aliens taking them. I don't think she thinks that at all. I think that they start the documentary with Linda saying, like what you said, you're a fucking alcoholic, bitter, fucking jealous ex-wife. And I mean, Carol just clearly puts that across. She clearly feels that way. She very much seems like a scorned woman. Right off the bat, she made a couple statements that made me just like go, oh wow, okay. And it's not like an attitude from somebody that I'm unfamiliar with. I've seen many people, both men and women, have this fucking attitude about somebody that their significant other had to work with or deal with. But she said Linda was, quote, Linda was the queen bee because she became the center of attention. I'm sorry, dude. Who else is going to be the center of attention during a fucking UFO abduction case? Probably the abductee. And then she kept saying how Linda always had to make sure her hair looked nice when there's a camera around. Every woman I know would do the same thing. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't seem like a conceited type thing or like trying to play it up to the camera. I think that there's some holes in Linda's story, or at least some parts that are surrounding her story, that I think Carol very much seemed vindictive and upset that Bud took a shining to Linda in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's really easy to see that side of it, but it's also there's weird things on both sides, really. Like I don't think that the events happened the way that they are reported to have happened. With the silly Men in Black stuff. I don't even think the abduction happened. My main question is why her son feels like it happened.
What do you say? I mean, in both sides, both directions, there's undeniable evidence in both directions. There's letters were faked. I just don't buy Linda being abducted and recording the whole fucking thing. I just don't buy that. But then there were witnesses that even Carol went back and talked to that said, no, we watched it happen. That there's just irrefutable evidence in both directions.
Yeah, to me, there's more evidence that fuckery is afoot than there is truth to the claims. The fact that there's so many witnesses is compelling, but how out of the realm of possibility is it that it's actually just a handful of people calling and changing their voices and reporting the same or similar thing? Maybe she had some people in on it. And maybe now that this documentary's out, maybe we'll start getting people coming out and being like, yeah, I was Linda's friend and we cooked this up over wine one night.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I got my brother to do it and my husband and then I called in and we made it a whole thing, but maybe not. And even if we do, it's going to be like the guy who claimed to be Bigfoot. You'll have people that are like, well, that's case closed. And you'll have other people being like, this guy's a fucking liar.
Yeah, the documentary left me with a feeling and a question I had for you. Watching the hypnosis tapes from the other people, the other abductees, not just Linda's, but mostly the other people's, and hearing Linda's story and me believing part of it, I walked away with two questions for you. Do you think that Bud and Linda were working together to just straight up fake a fucking story?
See, I don't want to think that of Bud. I really don't. And based on everything else that people say about Bud, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I do think that once he got invested in this case, that he turned a blind eye. Because I think he genuinely thought Linda was getting upset about things. And I think because of that, he lost. I mean, I think that Carol's got a point, and that I do think, at least in regard to Linda, he lost his objectivity, and he started taking everything that she said at face value. So when Linda was getting the attention from him, and she called to say she was just abducted, and he rushed over at like fucking 2 a.m. or whatever, and then she's on the phone with him when she gets kidnapped by federal agents, and I don't know. It's all too convenient.
Right, yeah. A little, just how it kept unfolding and twisting. I was like, oh my God. But the other thing I was left wondering is after, like I said, listening to those other abductees during their hypnosis and just watching that on everything, from sightings to unsolved mysteries when we were kids to now watching that stuff. Having all this time to think about that stuff and listen to what they're saying in their reporting and what abductees say when they go through hypnosis, do you think there's a chance that we're all just getting fucking abducted and there's just a handful of us that have adverse reaction to however they do it, whatever method they use to make us forget?
No, I do not. And I'm still kind of the mind that it's humans behind the whole abduction thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a usage of hypnosis and probably some sort of drug concoction to make the people believe that they've been abducted.
Yep, that is a possibility. I mean, it's not a possibility. We've talked about cases where that is the case.
Yeah, it's the military abductions.
Yeah, but flying them out a window, though, I don't know. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean that's assuming that that her story is true, which I'm not assuming that for a second. I'm assuming quite the opposite. I want to know the stuff that supports the story. There's got to be a reason behind it. The witnesses, there needs to be a reason behind it. Her son thinking he was abducted and believing everything about her story, there's got to be a reason for it.
yeah, there has to be. Will you guys watch the documentary while it's available if those fucking people are going to get sued? Shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the world we live in. But again, it just kind of that supports the idea that she wants to keep the attention on her.
Right.
You know, like, oh, I got a documentary about me. Now, once the documentary's over, now I can sue, and that's going to keep my name active.
Right. I would be like, I was in your favor, you goofball. Why are you suing these people?
Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe she is, maybe she's just crazier than we think she is. Or maybe she does a lot of acid, and maybe she gave some acid to her son, and that's, I don't know.
Will you guys watch it? Let us know what you think. And, yeah, you're not even safe on the 12th floor, motherfuckers.
Yeah, they're coming for you. They're going to get you.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.